can anyone show me proof of life for the Phoenix housing market? We got big news from the Fed last week and still crickets. The Fed stopped hiking rates and further announced that they are going to cut rates 3 times in 2024 and possibly 4 times in 2025. This is a 180 from the environment that we've been seeing for the last year and a half and should be good news for the housing market, but I'm not sure yet. So why the big change? Inflation is finally starting to come down. And while they aren't yet declaring victory, they're seeing enough change in the right direction to where they can pivot their policy away from rate hikes to rate cuts. So what does this mean for housing? After all, this channel is focused on Phoenix real estate. Well, to understand that, let's quickly review what has happened over the last year and a half. In March of 2022, the Fed raised the federal funds rate 25 basis points because the economy was overheating. Why was that happening? Well, that's another story, but basically when the pandemic started in 2020, the Fed did the opposite of this by cutting rates. We all spent way too much money and overheated the economy. So in March of 2022, the Fed did the first interest rate hike of 25 basis points, which was the first of 11 interest rate hikes that they did through July of 2023. So we've been in this tightening environment for some time now. Right after the Fed started to take action, inflation peaked at 9.1%. Since then, with these Fed rate hikes, we have started to see a pretty steady decline in inflation. And now the Fed is finally seeing inflation come close to their target and anticipates it being around 2.5% next year. This is why they paused those rate hikes and decided to pivot their policy, anticipating rate cuts next year. Again, what does this mean for the Phoenix housing market? I'm getting there. So it's important to note that the federal funds rate is not the mortgage interest rate. Mortgage lenders set interest rates based on their expectations for future inflation and interest rates. The supply of and demand for mortgage-backed securities also influences interest rates, providing another lever by which the monetary policy affects mortgage rates and mortgage lending. So in other words, if the federal funds rate is at 5%, that does not mean that the mortgage rates are at 5%. However, everything that the Fed does is then impacting mortgage rates as well. For example, everything that just went on last week with the Fed has been really good news for mortgage rates. The Fed hasn't even cut the federal funds rate yet, but if you look at where mortgage rates are, they have reacted very positively. Took a big dip last week. We're actually at the lowest levels we've been since May of this year, around 6.64%. Since October, rates have started to move downward, but this is the biggest drop that we've seen since that trend began. Side note, if you are a buyer, make sure you're checking in with your lender because this change will impact your affordability significantly in a good way. Now, there's been a lot of speculation that the housing market has a lot of pent-up demand, and as soon as rates go down, we're going to be in a frenzied environment. But I gotta be honest, it seems like we're just hearing crickets. Is it too soon to tell? Maybe. Perhaps it's just bad timing. We're a week away from Christmas and New Year's, which isn't the most motivating time of year to buy a home. And like I showed you, even though rates have been trending downward since October, we still haven't seen a very significant uptick in demand. Our listings under contract are only at 5,386, which is the lowest level since January of this year, and below the levels that we saw last year when that fall real estate market was pretty dismal. So why am I showing you listings under contract? Well, that's effectively our demand in the market. So let's talk about where we stand with supply and demand. Before I jump into that, make sure you hit the like button and consider subscribing if this information is helpful to you. So the Cromford Market Index is showing yet again that we are still in a balanced market, and this hasn't changed all that much since last week. Our demand index has kind of stopped declining and our supply index has stopped growing. So we've just been hanging out in this balanced market area around 104 for the last 2 to 3 weeks. Every now and then I love to show this visual so you can see what's actually happening with the CMI. We made some big drops downward through the fall, but you can see these dots are not only close together, but starting to level out, meaning there's just not a whole lot of movement going on and we're just hanging out in this balanced market. Now, when we look at the CMI by city, you'll notice a few green arrows this week. Scottsdale actually joined the bunch with Chandler and Goodyear, showing green, which means improvement for sellers. As we look at this, we need to know that the Cromford report says that red down arrows means that sellers lost ground in those cities, and green up arrows means that sellers gained some advantage in those cities. The opposite is true for buyers. So a red down arrow means good for buyers, and a green up arrow means bad for buyers. Now, keep in mind, most of these moves are not anything that you're going to notice if you're out there as a buyer or seller right now, but it is something that we look at on a weekly basis so we can better understand the overall trend. The average change month over month for all of these cities was negative 6.7%. And that's an improvement because last week when we looked at the month over month change, it was negative 9.9%. Therefore, we're seeing a slower decline amongst all of these cities. If you're a buyer in this market right now, targeting cities with the red down arrow could give you a slight advantage. And if you are a seller, hopefully you're in Chandler, Goodyear, or Scottsdale now joining the bunch, because that means things are improving for you. Just as I shared with the CMI dials, you can see here the different CMIs for every city. Anything under 90 is considered a buyer's market. So Surprise, Cave Creek, Queen Creek, Buckeye, and Maricopa are all technically in a buyer's market. Between 90 to 110 is considered a balanced market. So we've got Goodyear, Paradise Valley, Peoria, and Tempe all in a balanced market, and everything from Mesa up to Chandler is considered a seller's market. Even though we have some cities in a seller's market and appear to be strong, remember those listings under contract I showed you, things are just pretty slow right now. So with all of that, are lower rates really the savior, or do our prices need to come down as well? Are we just seeing this because of the time of year, or is there really no pent-up demand? My thoughts, I think it is a slow time of year, and as we get into January, the market will begin to rumble a little bit again. But of course, I want to hear from you, so put it in the comments. What do you think? Do you think these rate drops are really going to affect the demand that we have in the market, or do we just need to see prices start to come down? If you're one of those buyers waiting on the sidelines and want to see what inventory is out there, check the description below for a link to search our MLS for homes for sale, and check out this video here to see experts' real estate market predictions for 2024.